Hi, everybody. I'm Bob Bowman, Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Brain, and I want to welcome you to the third and final episode in a Warehouse Tech Outlook series presented by Texas, providing critical insights into the supply chain technology landscape for the near, middle, and long term. Our topic today is warehouse automation, the key automation technologies that will live in your warehouse within 5 years. One quick reminder, there will be an audience question and answer session at the end of this presentation. Audience members are encouraged to submit their questions at any time during the presentation by clicking on that Q&A icon at the bottom of your screen. Now, automating a warehouse is a decision not to be taken lightly. It requires a significant investment of capital, labor, and time, not to mention a long-term view of where the business is going. And there's a price to pay for getting it wrong. Underestimate, and you end up with a system that is quickly outgrown. Overestimate, and you get stuck with expensive automated furniture sitting idle in your distribution center. Now, in this session today, we're going to evaluate existing and emerging technologies and provide a longer-term view of where automation technology is headed so that supply chain professionals can make informed decisions about which automation technologies to invest in for the future. With that, I want to introduce our speakers for today. A.K. Schultz is CEO of SVT Robotics. He leads the overall company vision as well as product and go-to-market strategies. His work has primarily been in the Fortune 500 corporate sector, leading the design and implementation of high-profile automation projects across multiple industries. To date, he has overseen the successful deployment of over $500 million in automation. Rick Watkinson is Senior Product Manager with Texas. In his 30-plus year career, Rick has touched on every aspect of supply chain logistics. He was a lead developer in the mid-1980s on one of the first radio frequency-based warehouse management systems in North America and has seen the evolution of warehouse management technology from its infancy to its current state. And Han Lee Tremblay is Associate Practice Lead for Strategy with Avalon CSC. She's demonstrated expertise at the operational, tactical, and strategic levels in many different industries, and especially in the automation sector. Among other projects, Han Lee has advised executives on logistics network optimization, inventory optimization system implementation, distribution center automation, and logistics master planning. Welcome to all of you. Thank you very much for being with us today. With that, let's move into the panel discussion portion of our presentation. I'm going to start with posing a question for Han Lee. Han Lee, we've talked in these previous webinars in the series about what we've seen, what we've heard in the industry from events like ProMat, but from a real-world practical perspective, what has actually been happening in warehouses over the last couple of years? Let's start with your experience implementing warehouse systems.
All right, thank you very much, Bob. Really good question. What I would say about that is really ProMat, Modex, and all those kind of show really exist for many years. And one of my really personal opinion is that I don't feel that there's that much new, really complete new technology year after year. Yeah, for sure, there's a lot more player, but the technology itself, for me, is quite similar. And I think this is great for the market, for the people, because first they get used to them, they feel more secure, more confident about all that technology. And what I'm seeing in the real world of warehousing is like on every project when we're working on a greenfield or any expansion of a warehouse, now it's not a question on should we implement any technology, but it's really more on which one should we use. And what are you recommending, or what is your opinion regarding AutoStore versus a VLM versus a perfect pick, for example? So people really start to know them really well. And like a few years ago, that was really different. A few years ago, we had to convince people and companies that automation was a good opportunity. And really most of the time, they were just not ready for it. They didn't see the profitability, and at the end of the day, we went for a design as a catwalk or peak tower design. But today, honestly, it's really another game. Like technology, automation is on every project that I'm working on.
They weren't ready for it, but the world has made them ready for it just in the last couple of years. It's definitely an imperative.
Exactly.
Yeah, thanks for that, hon. Yeah. Rick, let me ask you, from your perspective and hearing from your customers and from the marketplace over the last few years, where do you see WMS or warehouse management system software development headed?
Well, definitely our customers have a lot of questions when you go into them, when you go see them, mostly around technology and automation these days. So as Hanli mentioned, very few projects are on the go these days without that piece of the puzzle, that automation technology. So there's no question warehouses are getting more complex, right? Gone are the days of pallets in, pallets out, and the warehouse was very easily controlled with just a warehouse management system. So our customers are asking for that more intelligent type of software, right? That can help them automate these and orchestrate these processes. They're also looking for easier integration with the vast numbers of automation technologies out there. As a software vendor, it's almost impossible to support each and every one of these technologies. So as a software vendor, we try to make our software as easy as possible to integrate with. And that's what our customers are asking. Because you go into one customer, they're going to want a VLM. You go to another, they want an AMR, etc. So make your software as automation friendly as possible. And the last thing we're talking about, a lot of customers are asking questions on AI. With the GPT thing, AI is becoming a huge topic of discussion. And where that goes, I think the sky's the limit on where that AI technology goes from. But those are some of the things we hear from our customers in the warehouse.
Well, Rick, let me ask you this. I mean, WMS has been around for many years. It predates this explosion in automation and robotics. WMS was adapted for warehouses that were largely made up of people. Is there a way in which your product, your software, has had to adjust to the coming of robotics and automation? Is there anything different about it now because there's so much more automation than there was in the early days of WMS?
Oh, absolutely, Bob. I mean, the product has to evolve. If the product doesn't evolve, you know as well as I know, warehouse management systems kind of are deemed as the system of record, right? They talk to an ERP system and they track a lot of things. Like I said, warehouse systems have to get more intelligent. They have to start orchestrating that relationship between the people and the hardware. And that's the direction that the software needs to go, and that's the direction the software is going. So that whole orchestration layer is typically referred to as a WES system, warehouse execution system. You've heard warehouse control systems are getting into it. So we're all getting into the same space about making that warehouse more intelligent, more automated, and take the decision process not away from the human being, but help the human being in that decision process.
Gone are the days when the big question of WMS is, when is it going to the cloud? I think it's a lot more complex now.
Absolutely.
AK, let me bring you into this. Now, your software basically facilitates integrations between systems like Rick's and a whole bunch of automation hardware. Now, which automation tech is now only emerging that you see becoming commonplace 5 years from now or so?
Yeah. Well, first of all, thank you for having me on the show. I'm so stoked to be here. And I get to answer the far forward question instead of what's happening today. So thanks for that. So let's talk about what's being enabled. Number one, computing power is just massive. Data storage is massive. Sensor technology is largely moving towards imagery. And then the interoperability of things is really becoming faster and faster. So what does that enable? Number one, data that we are producing is now going to start being used immediately rather than telling you what you did yesterday or changing your algorithms in the future. It immediately feeds back almost like a turbocharger, feeding your engine, as opposed to the data being digital exhaust. Now, the other thing this enables is obviously the generative AI piece. The generative AI piece is largely driven by data, right? That data once that data is consumable inside the warehouse, and you can really start to do interesting things. Now, the most famous generative AI platform right now is ChatGPT, right? But what it does mean is algorithms no longer have to be static, right? And that's a big deal. And then finally, what I'm seeing it just start to come out in a practical way, but really we're about 5 years, I would say, away from humanoid robots. I'll be honest with you, like before, most robots are very purpose-built. They do one thing. And the beautiful thing about humanoid robots is that, first of all, our world is designed for the human form. It is also a very versatile form. Now, it's not going to replace like your typical, like high-speed bottling line. That's not what it's meant to replace, but it's going to be there to do these multi-purpose things. And then also it's more likely, once the price point comes down, to be adaptable into operations that you would think are not suited to automation, simply because they're largely designed around the human form.
Wow. So this is sort of science fiction come true, because in the early days of robotics, like let's say even in a manufacturing plant, we were constantly being reminded by experts that we were wrong in imagining those to be human or humanoid. That they were, very purpose-built. You'd have some robotic arm that would just be doing something all the time. Now you're talking about robots that actually we are going to enter that phase. I think that's really fascinating, AK. But AK, let me pick up on one thing that you were mentioning just now. You said interoperability. Data in a warehouse flows today from so many different points, because there is no one system in a warehouse. There are multiple systems. Data is coming from the pick wall. Data is coming from the humans. Data is coming from, bringing stuff in and sending it out. Are we in an environment today where all that data from multiple systems is coming together so that it can all be coalesced and brought together in one on a real-time basis?
The answer is most definitely. I would say it is my zealot-like mission to help solve this problem, because everything that you can imagine to be really cool to be done really depends on interoperability and seamless data exchange. And think about this, right? So first of all, we have about 50 technologies on the platform, but that enables almost 1,000 different combinations of technology if you orchestrate the data the right way, right? And right now, the status quo is to establish point-to-point connections, right, from a WMS to a piece of software or a piece of automation. Now think about this: an order that comes down that goes to a picking device contains data that is not usable by the picking device. However, it does contain things like dimensions, which could be used to, do an auto box erector. It also contains that data also could be used for rate shopping, right? So like right now, if you have a printer, a manifesting software, rate shopping software, a box erector, a picking device, a put wall, all the data in this order is essentially contained there, but those 10 technologies have a single solitary interface instead of the WMS posting data and publishing the data, and then these other technologies just subscribing and plucking out the data they want, stripping out what they don't need, and then consuming it. And this is really what interoperability platforms enable.
Great, thank you. Han Lee, take me from humanoid to human, okay? What do you see the role that actual humans will have in the warehouse of the future?
Yeah, that's a really good one. I mean, I think I don't have a better crystal ball than everyone else here, but my thought is that human will always have to be present in the warehouses, like even the most automated one. I think that the studies really demonstrate that the function of maybe like the lower education, like the low entry job, will tend to disappear at some point, but human will have more a support roles, such as like supervising, maintaining all that new automated system, doing some monitoring, doing some troubleshooting of technical issue and more that IT side of it. But right now in the real world, what I'm seeing is that this might come, but in many, many years. Like when I look at all medium business or business that we're working on, like it's coming, but it's not now, and it's not. I don't see that in the near future. Like they all jump into the automation, but human will have a big role, and for everything that is non-routine, everything that is a bit more complex than just pick and pack and ship. And we talk a lot about AI, but I'm really the one that think that ChatGPT and all that AI stuff will never be able to replace a human. We also see mostly like in manufacturing, most like the role of human assisting robots, what we call the cobots. So I think that's also another role that the human will take, is to assist and how to improve and then all the robots, like making sure that it runs smoothly and it brings more efficient to the robotic.
I wonder if it's a glass empty or glass half full argument. Will it be humans assisting robots, or will it be robots assisting humans? It depends on kind of the perspective you have there. But Han Lee, I mean, we already have, in very select circumstances, we already have lights out warehouses around the world in certain places where no human being, I mean, literally it's dark because there's no people there. Are you saying that those are going to continue to be confined to very specific types of products and uses? We will not see a large build out of that model?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think this is true. This is what we see for, let's say, the really multi-billionaire companies like the Amazon of the world, or other company like that. Will it become like an average thing? This is where I don't think so. And even in the really lights out warehouse, the black warehouses, there's human behind. Like they just not in the front scene. They're not within the warehouse doing the actual job of operating the warehouse, but there's people behind on monitoring, on every kind of engineering people to maintain that warehouses. So even in those, there's many people that are working on, maybe more in the office, but those will just not be able to disappear.
Rick, AK made a very good observation about the role of software and data interoperability. So I'd like to ask you where you see the role that software has, or what will be the role of software in the warehouse of the future. Will it be the glue that holds all this together? Will it be even more? What will software be doing?
I think the role of software is going to change from, like I said earlier, pretty much a system of record type of software, which is typical WMS, to more of an orchestration, right? You've got way more complexity in the warehouse these days. Rather than just managing people with maybe RF devices, or heaven forbid, even paper, you now have to manage those people in conjunction with automation, with robots, with AGVs, which whatever technology you're having in there. And the software, like you said, Bob, is going to be the glue that holds all of these things together, that orchestrates the work from one kind of thing that's doing the work. And it could be a human being, it could be the robot, passing it along to another thing that does the work. So the software is going to take a key role in that whole process of getting your stuff in the door, getting it out on time, orchestrating the work, and keeping a smooth operation running in your warehouse.
I love that word orchestration, because the metaphor is very apt. And it isn't just a question maybe of just passing along from one system to the other, but in the case of like an actual orchestra conductor, it's getting everyone to play together. So AK, tell me more about your concept of orchestration as warehouses evolve. And it's the ability of these systems to control all these bots of different types and from different vendors.
Yeah. So first of all, I want to add a little bit to the last question.
Sure.
People talk about robotics as machines. Robots are software. The metal happens to do what the software says, right? So any other than just the most basic machines, the software is the product, not the opposite. So I like to think the metal as puppets, right? And And it's not to diminish like the mechanical ingenuity side, because there's a lot of advancements there. But if you really look at the devices that really set themselves apart, it really comes down to the feature set in the software that makes a difference. Now, on the orchestration side, I think the Symphony is the perfect analog for this question, right? So like, if you think about what a conductor does not tell the trumpet player or the violinist exactly, he does not control the exact playing. And if you think about how how a symphony works, each individual instrument, each individual player is a node. And if you think of orchestration layers that are really flexible, treat the individual systems like nodes rather than as like master control queen bee kind of thing, right? And this node mentality is also very similar to how neural networks work. And so why is this important? Well, designing a system that is extremely rigid and monolithic, like most lights out systems are monolithic and rigid in nature, and they represent how your business operates today. But it also essentially freezes your business in time if you cannot change the design, and the design is extremely tied to each other. Whereas you want interoperability, not rigidness. And the only way to get interoperability is for each individual system be an independent node. This is, Gardner calls this multi-agent orchestration, where no system is directly interacting with another, but they do have a relationship with one another. And if you think about how humans operate, this is also how humans operate, right? We don't share a brain, but we can work with each other without actually having a hard-coded interface.
And if we're in an orchestra, we have that each of us has a direct relationship with the conductor. If not with each other, the conductor is communicating with everybody and coordinating everybody. So again, I really love that metaphor. I want to follow up on this concept of flexibility because it is a big issue. This is not an inexpensive venture to automate a warehouse. It in effect, it's a little bit like throwing the dice. So Han Lee, how do you ensure that you don't outgrow your automation over time, or while also making sure at the same time that you don't overinvest?
Yeah, thank you, Bob. So for this one, let me give you my top 3 tips for that. So the first one would be make sure to perform a solid assessment, and like just be sure to understand your business. And this could sound a bit silly, but you'll be surprised how much this can save you in terms of money and time. Like what I'm saying is like get accurate data such as what is your peak hours, what is your seasonality, know all the product specification, be sure to know your product velocity, cubing, and so on. Because even if an automation can do, let's say, 500 lines per hour, it doesn't mean that this is what you need, and maybe you just don't have the volume for it. So really the first is know your business. The second one would be flexibility and scalability. This should be on top of your priority when you're choosing for any type of automation. I think this is pretty much self-explained, but really flexibility, scalability, I would say like on top of your selection should be as important as return on investment as a whole. And my last and third tips would be let your automation pay for your next automation. And what I'm saying by that is like, let's say you're building a new warehouse. It's okay to build that new building for like a 20 years of growth from now. But when we're talking about selecting an automation, you don't have to buy right now an automation for like in 20 years, what will be your growth and what your business will look like. First of all, if you're doing that, it will just kill your return on investment because your system will be so big and not used at his full capacity as in the first year. But make sure to like have the space available next to it for the expansion and also for like any growth that you will have, and let the gain in productivity finance the next technology project or like the phase 2 or any enhancements. Like I will say, like, focus on short-term savings that will allows you to invest in any enhancements or improvement, and that will make sure that your system is never outgrow, because you will start and then you will just continue growing that system with new technology.
Yeah, we all know that the demand for ROI, for quick ROI these days is really there, much more than it used to be. Implicit in what you're saying, Han Lee, though, is that there is some kind of automation available to warehouses of just about any size or sophistication. Is that not true? We're not just talking about only a 1 million square foot warehouse can afford to automate. There's micro fulfillment centers and then going all the way up to the big ones. Is that in fact the case, that there is some level of automation available to all these different types of warehouses, as long as you make the proper assessment of who you are and what you need?
That's exactly that, Bob. Yeah.
Yeah, interesting. Well, let me turn to you, AK, and ask you this whole idea of kind of throwing the dice, or maybe let's use the word hedge their bets. How can supply chain professionals, again, hedge their bets when it comes to making an investment in robotics?
Well, the first thing about placing a bet is doing research, right? It's not a slot machine. You know, you really want to understand what you're doing. And I agree completely with Han Lee that really self-awareness of your business and your processes has to come first, because when one of the worst things that people can do is go out and buy a robot. What they really want to buy is an outcome, right? And if you are saying, oh, that's cool, I saw it on YouTube, really, if you don't understand what the outcome needs to be, then you're probably going to be very disappointed. I think also you're talking about how like there's risk associated with overinvestment. The entry level robots, in my opinion, should always be a low step change. In other words, back in the olden days, you wanted to buy a crossbelt sorter, you're spending $3 million and you got massive capacity on day one, but you probably weren't using it. And it took years for that investment to get maximized. If you look at some of these mobile robots, these mobile robot picking solutions, you can scale them up one at a time. You can put robots in at peak and pull them back out because you're renting the bots. I mean, this allows you to, let's face it, when you go and deploy robots, they will be wrong to some extent. You will be wrong in your bet. The question is, how wrong are you? Sometimes you're wrong to the good, sometimes you're wrong to the bad. But if the step change and the investment level is scalable, you don't have to be wrong by $1 million, $5 million. You can be wrong by $25,000 or $100,000. This, of course, is much better for people who value their careers and their career prospects, right? So, and then what I would say is, especially for those just getting started, think about the robotics that don't require a massive infrastructure change, or starting out like it has to be a greenfield because the building doesn't work, or like the footprint, or we got to buy all new rack. These are very hard bets to place and win at. I'd say some of the most high traction robotics companies have almost zero infrastructure changes. You can drop them in and roll within a few weeks, as opposed to 2 years. So that would be my advice.
Are you alluding to the concept of robots as a service in terms of being able to scale up and down the number of units in your facility depending on the season, for instance, on peaks and valleys in demand?
Yes, robotics as a service is super helpful for especially companies just getting started.
Mm-hmm.
What I'd say, it's not applicable for everything, but in these independent agent type softbot or robots, it's very applicable.
Great advice there. We've been alluding a little bit over these last few minutes, constantly talking about AI, artificial intelligence. And I'd like you, Rick, to address more directly how you actually see AI as fitting into the warehouse of the future.
Sure. So there's no question, Bob, that AI, it's going to play a transformative role in warehousing. I mean, it's going to revolutionize, how operations are conducted and optimized. So yeah, I'd really like to put this question into Chat GPT and see what it comes up with, see if it's smart enough to know what its own future looks like. But some of the things that we've been playing around with, and you see out in the industry, things like demand forecasting, predictive maintenance, automated quality control, where something can look at something and see if there's an issue with the pick, things like that. Smart inventory management, the list goes on and on. One of the ones that I'm really interested in, and I see a bright future for, is the whole voice and natural language recognition. So think about older technology, older voice picking, right? It was very scripted. Go here, pick this. There was responses, things like that. The possibilities for that natural language processing I think are very bright in the warehouse future space. You could have a help system where somebody asks a question and you get an answer from one of these natural language processing things. So from an AI perspective, there's a lot of things that the technology can bring to the table, and I think you're going to see more and more over the next few years of software companies and vendors starting to roll out this technology.
Will we be looking to AI to be descriptive, predictive, or prescriptive? The last meaning that the AI actually makes the decisions, and we humans, to the extent we're even still there, are simply carry out the commands of the AI.
I think that's the ultimate destination for this thing, Bob. Now, when you say ultimately, makes the decisions, I really think there's always going to be that human element that gives that kind of AI technology the voice of reason. We see it with the AI technology today, right? You go into Chat GPT and you type in a question. You've got to kind of take that with a little bit of grain of salt. You got to kind of rationalize what it's saying to a certain degree. So I think AI for a warehouse is in the same kind of space here, the same kind of predictive path, where it's going to help us with those decision-making processes, but I don't think it's going to take ultimate control, at least in the foreseeable future.
Yeah, I mean, not to keep harping on. Oh, go ahead. You're raising your hand there, AK. You have something to say?
Yeah, I mean, so I think it's definitely going to have a play, and it really comes down to how much data can be harvested to make better decisions. And I'm going to give you the one that I'm very looking forward to seeing one day is slotting, right? The ability to say reslot your warehouse based off of unknown factors. So for instance, if one of your products is trending on Instagram, right, and suddenly that gets fed in as a precursor to a spike in demand, or maybe just clicks on the website. People will tend to click on the same item like 15, 20 times before they ever buy. So just the number of click volume could actually say, hey, maybe we should put this product more forward. The other thing, like we're talking about how it impacts the operators. I think one of the longest and most difficult part of deploying a robot is the edge, the algorithms on the edge, or the use cases on the edge. And I'm here to tell you, like, our devs are already using Chat GPT to go faster. Like I've told Chat GPT to write a program, and it'll spit out code and it compiles, right? And then I'll say, okay, do it in Python, and then I'll say do it in C#, and then I say do it in Java, and it all works, right? This is bonkers. Now, what you can't say is build a WES, right? You're probably not going to get what you want. But if you, as a creator, tell it what to build, you can really have people punch above their weight. And there is a point in which people who are smart, but not necessarily coders, will be able to implement algorithms without developers, or be able to do like a raw proof of concept program and hand it to an engineer to take it the rest of the way. It's It's actually amazing and terrifying at the same time when you start really playing with it. But this will be a time that we all remember, for good or for bad.
Well, I suppose you could say that back in the day, the old models of like first in, first out, last in, first out, ABC prioritization of where you put things in the warehouse, those are in effect human algorithms. But this sounds like this is going to make a mockery of our attempts to create what we thought were sophisticated algorithms back then. That's really fascinating. Thanks so much for that, AK, and for all of you. Yeah, at this point, I would like to bring the audience in, however, to our question and answer session here. And I encourage, we do have some audience questions already in, but audience members, please continue to submit your questions during this period, and we will get to as many of those as we possibly can, time permitting. So let's try this one from the audience. There's so many robot companies. That is true. The concern is company robot A is best now, but company robot B 5 years from now is best, but you can't use both as they do not communicate. How do you decide looking 10 years out? Oh my God. We did address this a little bit about rolling the dice on investments at all, but this is more about rolling the dice on the choice of actual vendor. Who wants to take this? Okay. AK, go with it.
Yeah. So I think, again, I'm going to harp on the data side because I think that's what was part of the core question. So the key to this is to make sure the data comes in a consistent way. So if you take a mobile robot, which is a transport bot, what telemetry does it need? It needs, tell me where to go, tell me what to get, tell me where to take it. And the robot has to communicate back what it did. And it would also be helpful to communicate where it was along the way. But whether you're robot A or robot B, I don't care. If you're doing a transport task, that data is exactly the same. Now, every company produces and consumes the data in a different way. So the thing that we like to do is actually take, no matter how their data comes in, we convert it into a common data framework so that even if you had two robot companies in place, you wouldn't be able to tell data-wise which company was either being served or serving. And this also applies to things like warehouse management software, right? In a multi-tenant warehouse where you have multiple WMSs, the WMS data can be converted into one type of, like an order is an order, right? If you think about it, structurally an order is pretty much the same and could be consumed by one robot fleet. Right. So this concept of many to many will make it more flexible. Now, here's the thing. You're right. You will make bets that are wrong. And here would be my recommendation. Make the bets that are smaller, make the bets that you can be wrong with and live with those bets. And that means not buying this massive $30 million monolith. By independent agents, and then make them all communicate in the same framework on the same data bus with a common timestamp, and you'll be much happier.
Han Lee, you walked us earlier through this whole concept of assessing one's investment over the long term. I wonder if you could respond to this question, which is specifically, again, about the actual vendors you choose, company A versus company B, and how you make that determination without locking yourself into one vendor and then only realizing 5 years from now that the other one is better. Do you have any advice to us as to how to weigh different vendors in that way?
That's a really good question. I fully agree with what AK said. I think as consultant, what I like to say is that, let's say you prefer to have one type of automation, doesn't need to be a brand. It's just that the type could be like, let's say ASRS or AMRs, doesn't need to go on. I want to have the Conveco one, for example, and this is just one that comes in my head. And after that, when you make those, like when you have all the process map, you know your exception, and let the vendor prove themselves, prove the demo, and make sure that they get your process right away. And at the end of the day, it's I think if it's on the same, they all got the same rate in terms of costing, lead time, and all that different criteria, it will comes to a matter of like, what do you feel with which company that you will feel more comfortable to work with for many years. For which one do you feel that the aftermarket service will be better and that the level of service fits with your organization? So it's maybe like hard because it's soft, like just soft skills and soft criteria. But at the end of the day, if they are all the same, I'll say just go with your guts, go with your feeling.
What do you feel? How human of you, Hanli, to say that. We're not at the age yet where machines are going to tell us how to buy other machines. That's actually a good guide. Okay, this questioner is asking is another AI question, and it's an interesting angle on it. What is the role of AI to drive operational efficiencies like slotting? We did talk about that, traveling time optimization, but most importantly, what is the connection with LMS, a labor management system? And this is where I get a little frightened. The idea of a machine or an automated system telling me, a warehouse worker, that I'm not picking enough units per hour, that I'm not doing a job based on its assessment of what is maximum optimized labor management. Tell me, maybe Rick can address this issue of LMS and AI.
Yeah. So we sort of have that outside of AI today, right? So a labor management system is set up to say you're going to pick X number of cases per hour, X number of eaches per hour, whatever the case may be. I think AI, and I think you're right in your assessment there, Bob, when you say it's a little frightening in some instances where AI may start to be that almost like a supervisor, right? Where it's going to make its own decisions based on the knowledge it has and the information that, like AK mentioned, the information that it's being shared with to make those decisions. My personal opinion is that I don't think we're ever going to get there. If we do get there, that will be a pretty scary thing, because you are now letting the AI run that kind of facility where normally a human being would have some kind of judgment in that area. So I do see that as a possibility, but I'm not sure that's going to be in our immediate future.
This next question is an interesting one because it addresses something that people talk about all the time. It's asking how the automation implementations translate in organizational changes. Now, I find it interesting because people always say, well, okay, the robots will take over certain repetitive, monotonous tasks, and the humans will be given other things to do. And it's not always specified exactly what those other things to do are. This questioner is saying, what might be the new role of experts to maintain the technology, keep it running, fixing tech issues? Anybody want to tackle that more specifically?
Yeah, I can take that. I think, so first of all, I think if you see the fastest growing robotics companies right now and automation companies, they tend to have a human in the loop. In other words, the robot's doing what a robot's good at, and the human's doing what a human is good at. So if you take, for instance, not to plug Locust, but the robot is essentially optimizing the path of where to go, right? And what to pick, so that it's not like if you're like a new employee, it's like showing up at a warehouse. It's almost like going to a new grocery store where you're trying to figure out where the milk is and so on and so forth. Well, if you interface with a Locust system, you don't actually need to know where everything is. You can immediately start being productive. But then the robot also does things that are cheap for them, but costly for humans. And that's taking the finished orders out a long travel distance, so the human can continue to do the task that is really hard, which is the hand-eye coordination work, right? I think the other place where humans will continuously be in the loop is the exception handling side. The bane of robotics projects is exception handling. All those edge cases. And if your robotic system does not allow for a human to participate in the exception handling quite easily, then that's a problem. So this is why robots inside a fence are a problem. Because the moment you open the fence, everything shuts down until it gets fixed. Whereas collaborative bots can keep operating with humans processing these exceptions.
Life is made up of exceptions, isn't it? Or so it sometimes seems. Okay, this question I'm going to direct it maybe to Han Lee. How quickly can I get robots up and running in my distribution center today?
Yeah, this is kind of a tricky question, and maybe AK can help you out with this one, but I would say that this really depends. It depends on the type of robot that you're using, the complexity of the task that you're asking the robots to do, and also the level of integration. And this is where I think AK can probably say something about that. But the robot itself, do you want to integrate it only with a WMS or a WCS or any other type of technology that you have in your warehouse? And like, because I've seen some like cobot that can be implemented in a week, but there's also on the other side, like some AMRs that can take many, many months from the configuration to the installation and like the post go live and so on. So it really depends, I would say, on the complexity. I don't know if you have anything else on that, AK, but
yeah, I mean, I agree, but here, maybe a little bit extra color would be, especially if you're just starting out, right? I would say look at two things. Number one, where's there like an attractive amount of savings and benefit? Number one, but number two, in this, what is the lowest risk, highest output thing you can do for your first project? You do not want to take on a big complex goods to person system as your first thing, because frankly, if it's your first automation project, your company is not qualified to do it, and it'll probably end poorly. Start small, get some wins, you'll start discovering what type of talent internally you don't possess that you need to go hire, and then build upon that.
Okay, thank you. This question, again, kind of bouncing off the same stuff we've been talking about roles, but they're saying maybe I could get a little more detail about that. How roles in the supply chain change in the next 5 years from that of a laborer to a warehouse manager to a supply chain leader. Again, people. Anybody want to talk about what each of those individuals will be doing in 5 years that they're not doing now?
Sure. I mean, if you look at the laborer, we'll start with the laborer, Bob. Obviously some of those manual repetitive tasks are going to be taken away by automation. We all see that. That's a no-brainer. So I think the laborer, they're going to need to acquire new skills. I think AK mentioned this. I think there's always going to be that spot in the warehouse for things that require a certain amount of dexterity and a certain amount of that human judgment, right? And that could be the exception handling, as AK mentioned before. So I think there's always going to be that spot for the human being, that labor in the warehouse. I think your warehouse manager, I think they're going to be tasked with more a directional thing. How to bring that efficiency to the warehouse is going to be a lot more complicated than it was in the future. So they're going to have to be more educated on kind of the supply chain trends, what type of automation is out there, how to use that automation better in their warehouse, et cetera, et cetera. So obviously those roles are going to change. That's just a couple of examples, laborers or warehouse managers, but those roles will definitely change with automation in the future.
AK, you raised your hand on that one. You have any more to say?
Yeah, I've got a couple non-obvious ones, I think. Number one, IT. IT is an infrastructure organization. If you're going to embrace robotics, you need to be much closer to the business applications. And if I look at we do a lot of work with 3PLs. If I look at the companies that are crushing it, the IT departments are actually very intimate with the operation. They're very intimate with the business applications. They're not just the server, the cloud, and the network guys, right? It's a very different mindset, and it's a difference maker between success and failure. The other is with these low code platforms that are available to write logic. Suddenly the warehouse operators can start writing code for simple applications using these visual layers, these RPA layers, if you will. I think more and more people who are operators that are IT savvy are going to be the ones that are most valuable.
Okay, thanks for that, everybody. I hate to say it, but unfortunately, we were just about out of time. We have time for one final question, and I'm going to direct it to Rick. Okay, Rick, so with different kinds of automation becoming more available and the need for automation increasing, how can supply chain professionals take advantage of new technologies in warehouses that already have preset processes, infrastructure, and in some cases, existing automation hardware?
Worst kept secret out there, Bob. I mean, the world's rapidly evolving, right? And we as supply chain professionals, we're faced with that challenge of optimizing warehouse operations every day, but keeping in those constraints you mentioned about this processes, infrastructure, and existing hardware. And I know it seems overwhelming. Things are changing fast. You go to a show like ProMat, there's hundreds of different automation vendors out there with many, many different types of automation products. But first and foremost, don't go this alone. Rely on your trusted technology partner. They're there to help. Second, identify the pain points and inefficient processes. Look for bottlenecks, processes that are prone to error, etc. You can start small. I think AK mentioned this, maybe an AGV taking product from production over to receiving. That's a small win, but it's a win. And third, embrace the flexible automation. You don't have to put up racks of conveyors or ASRSs. There's newer forms that can easily integrate with your existing processes. Maybe do only one warehouse in the area, not the whole warehouse, so not to disrupt that entire flow of the warehouse. AMRs, perfect example about that technology that goes in one area of a warehouse. And lastly, and I think most importantly, don't procrastinate on this. This is the future, right? And you don't want your business to be at a disadvantage.
Don't procrastinate. You say, I can think of a less delicate way to put it, but I'm going to stick with the way you described it, Rick. Thank you very much for that.
I'll stick with that one, Bob.
What a fascinating subject. So many elements to it, so many nuances, and the three of you have done such a great job in covering them all in this short time we had together. It's so informative, and thank you very much to all of you for this great presentation, and audience also for your attendance and your fantastic questions as well. I want to direct our attendees to a source of more information connecting with Texas. Here is a link to an ebook. Don't worry about having to scramble that down on a piece of paper right now. This will be sent to you, to all attendees. You'll get that link in the presentation sent to you. Finally, I do want to remind everybody that this is the last installment of Texas's Warehouse Tech Outlook webinar series on providing actionable insights into the supply chain technology landscape for the near, middle, and longer terms. If you missed any of the earlier webinars, I urge you to go check them out. They're just as compelling, as interesting as this one, and they're all available on demand from the Supply Chain Brain website. AK Schultz, Rick Watkinson, Hanley Tremblay, thank you again so much for a great presentation. Audience, once again, thank you for your participation. And everybody, have a great day.
Thank you very much.
Bye, guys.